Hello. Welcome to Riqueza podcast.
Thank you for having me, Lee. I appreciate you for sharing your platform. It's good to see you again.
Yes, today we have a very special guest, guys. This is someone who I feel like is disrupting the queer industry from an economic standpoint. I feel like you're really speaking to what's going on in our community from all angles. And the one focus that you do have is the economy of the LGBTQ plus community. So, Travers, please introduce yourself to my community.
Hey, everyone. My name is Travers Johnson. I am the founder and CEO of Queerency, and we're an LGBTQ business media company. We cover queer owned brands and businesses, inspiring LGBTQ entrepreneurs, and just really want to cover the queer economy with dignity and depth. Yeah, I met you, I guess, like over a year ago now at this
Yeah.
point, and you were one of the people that I was just so inspired by because of the way in which you've been able to really share your journey towards building wealth and the intersections with like your background, your ethnic background, your immigrant background, your queer background, all of
Mm.
that, and so that's really cool. So thank you for your work.
Oh, you got made me cry. No, I appreciate it. I feel like it's hard. It's been a journey. I think you've seen me for a while grow. I mean, I've been really transparent about the changes in my life and how I've been wanting to be accepting of all my identities because I feel like just in the environment we were growing up, we always had to separate what we were in order to kind of fit in the spaces, right?
Yeah.
And as I left corporate world and started my own business, I feel like I restarted my own life, and I was like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to accept all of me and showcase that, yes, I'm queer, I'm Latina, I'm first generation, I am also 25 and trying to build wealth and very smart. I have degrees in finance. It's not like taken this out of like a textbook right here. No, it's education that I've learned, and I'm glad that I also was able to find more representation on social media during the pandemic. And that's where obviously I found you. I don't even know how we connected, but
I don't
when I,
either. It's so weird. Like social media is so weird. It's like you forget after a while. You forget how you met someone on social media, when it
yeah,
happened, because it just now it feels like forever, right? Like it
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like I've been connected with you for since time began, but it can't be more than like 2 years.
Yeah,
This
I
currency
just,
hasn't been around. Yeah.
yeah, and I think for me it was just finding where can I fit into and all like as a user and
Mm,
like consuming media and social, info. I was like, where can I find myself represented? And I think, for me, the happiest part was finding your page talking not just about the queer, environment that we're in. I think you mentioned politics. You mentioned a lot of things that are not just economy, but the fact that you do talk about economy and the way that we're shifting and disrupting the industries, the way that we are also being challenged as well. You bring up all those insights on your page. You have a TikTok, you have an Instagram,
hmm
but I honestly fell in love with it because I was like, wow, thank you. Someone who's actually talking about us other than just another statistic that I read on an article.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad that that's the mission behind what I wanted to do, and I'm glad that it's resonating. And yeah, I mean, I feel that because, I think that a lot of what I'll just talk about the reason I started Queerency is because I
Yes, I'll
didn't
start there.
see any representation on like queer owned businesses in either the mainstream business media or like LGBTQ general interest media. So like, the big ones like Out Magazine or whatever. And and yet I would always come across these really amazing LGBTQ entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And most people weren't talking about them or even acknowledging them outside of Pride Month, if even then.
If yeah.
And I was just so blown away at the amazing things that not only were people doing now, but like in the past. Like,
Mm.
I didn't know that Sirius XM Radio was founded by a trans woman, right?
Yeah.
Or that Facebook has a gay co-founder, right? And I thought to myself that, like, if I don't know this, and I'm someone with a background in media and publishing and all that, I'm sure that other people don't either. And what does that do to, like, the sort of like our mindsets and also the glass ceilings that we put on who we can be and what we can achieve, right? Because a lot of times you can only be what you can see, and if you're not seeing other people do or succeed in business that look like you or love like you or just in your community, it's almost hard to even imagine that you can do that too. So that's why I wanted to really, that's like what drives my work. And with you, like, you are doing that in so many awesome ways and like so many intersections. Like you talked about with me, like I intersect like the like business and the economy with politics sometimes, history, you know, just general joy and good news and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that approach is not so different than you, because you do a lot of those intersections. Because the other thing that I think that like I wanted to do and why I was so drawn to your work is that like it's not just your same old boring business podcast or business video or business article. Like I think that what makes why we are resonating with our audience, and this is what people tell me all the time, is that like, you know, it's relatable, it reframes some of the conversations from just like, what is the stock market doing today or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, you know, just really making it personal and authentic. So yeah.
Oh, stop. This is not about me. This is not about me. This is about you. I think, you know, no, thank you. I appreciate it. I think the only way I know how to do that, or the only way I could think about that, is because I am queer. And I think being queer really pushes my creative side, because now I feel like, I don't know what it is, and maybe you agree, I don't know, but like I feel like ever since I realized I was queer, I was like, damn, I'm free, man. Like I'm no longer tied to the chains of society. I can now discover my identity, figure out what I want, learn more about my queer identity, because it's not about even me. It's about the sisters and brothers and our non-binary folk before us and our trans folk before us, you know, because that history has been tried, you know, it's been erased sometimes, you know, like I feel like we have these conversations during Pride, but I wasn't taught about this in school. You know, I'm from Utah. Like we're very conservative. I barely learned about slavery, you know, and so when I came out, it was discovering not only like who I am in America, like for the first time, and like being born here and being raised by immigrants, but also like I'm gay. Like even in my own culture, we don't have those conversations. And how does that affect me in my workplace? How does that affect me in my religion? How does that affect me just in general life, right? Yeah. And where does this come from? Like, how has it affected others before me too? Because that's how I can present myself if I know what's happened in the past. And as I discovered, you know, through my own search, like I've always been eager to understand the source of who I am and how I can, you know, also love who I am. I just really appreciate the fact that we can also find somewhere to go to learn about what's going on in not only our businesses. I love that you mentioned like small business, you know, small businesses all the time on your page, and you like amp them up, and that's the energy that we need, because no one's really talking about how we're navigating our businesses. Like there's an article here and there every June. This is how LGBTQ plus do this, you know, or do that. And it's never like, what's the ongoing growth as not only a small business owner, but being a person in the queer community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you hit on a couple of things that like, you know, that also really drive my work is like, first of all, the best data that we have, and this is like, you know, this is data from several years ago, but like it's probably even a bit conservative because queer people aren't even counted in the census. But the best data that we have says that there in the United States alone there are 1.4 million LGBTQ small business owners, right? My guess is that there are much more than that, but those are just the ones that we know from a study done by the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And we also know that these businesses contribute over 33,000 jobs to the economy every year, $1.7 trillion to the U.S. economy annually. Yeah. And that the global LGBTQ economy is like $3.7 trillion, right? So it's important. I thought it was important to really highlight that information, but also frame the work that we do as like actual industries and businesses, that they are, because I think a lot of times, when it comes to, like I was talking about this recently, but like there's this term called quote unquote women's work, and it's been historically used derogatorily to sort of undermine the value of professions that women sort of over-index in, right? So teachers, nurses, even just people who are stay-at-home parents, right? Yeah. Like we say that's not real work. That's not a man's work. That's not, and thus should not be valued as highly and also paid as well, right? Like one of the reasons teachers and nurses aren't paid as well as some other professions is because women are the foundation of that, right? And we already know about the wage gap with women, and then the intersections of the wage gap when you get to Latinx women and Black women and indigenous women, etc. For queer folks, I think there's a similar phenomenon, right? Like when we think of industries where queer folks are, there's always like the stereotypical like gay man hairstylist or fashion designer or makeup artist, or for lesbian women like a construction worker or other blue collar job. And we look at those as sort of like hobbies and like fun little things that these queer folks like to do to have fun and be frivolous. But these are billion-dollar industries, right? And so I think just the framing and reframing of how not only people in our community look at the work that we do, but people outside of the community appreciate the work that we do is so important. And the only way to do that, or the way that I choose to contribute to that reframing, is through my work with Queerency and through media, because otherwise people will just continue to look at like RuPaul as just like a drag queen, whereas RuPaul is a media mogul, right? A business mogul. Like there's no reason that we shouldn't know the name of the founder of Grindr the same way we know the name of the founder of Facebook, right? And those are just a huge example. So much unlike a smaller everyday version of, with small businesses, we're contributing to our communities in ways that deserve to be respected and, framed with the dignity that they deserve.
Yeah, I think as a small business owner myself and being queer, I feel like I've been able to lean on my Latinidad to hold me afloat most of the time, because my intersection of also being queer, and I don't know if you've noticed this either, but I feel like anytime I make a post or do anything gay, like my views go, like they go down, because a lot of like my content has been based on my identity of being Latina, right? But I'm also very gay. And sometimes when I post about like gay news or like, especially in the Latin community, they're like, huh, interesting, pero like, let's go. Like, I don't want to hear about it anymore. And so like the news in my community isn't, we don't pay attention to that unless it's someone who was murdered, like a trans woman murdered at the border or something like that. That's when they're going to be like, oh shit, you know what I mean? But other than that, they're not hearing about our growth. They're not hearing about how we also run our businesses and how we show up, because I'm not I'm not a hairstylist. I don't do
Right.
I'm not a construction worker. I'm not a handy woman. Girl,
Right.
like, no, I'm not. I mean, I do finances and I just talk about my life. That's really it. And what I've discovered is that once I decided, like, I'm going to show up as me, like, you know what? I'm very gay, very much gay as I am Latina. I'm very much everything. But how can I show up authentically as myself? And also, how can I tie that to growing my business and also supporting other businesses that follow these intersectionalities too? Because it's like, oh yeah, you're Black and you're queer, you're trans woman of color, whatever, right? Like, these are all big things and weights that we have to carry, right? And especially with being a small business owner, it's like you have to show up authentically. But how are you gonna make sure that your community loves you authentically too, right? Because sometimes if we fall or lean on one identity, they might not love and lean on the other side of my identity. You know what I mean? And so I feel like now, like in this current age in my life, I'm like weeding out the people that do not align, right?
Okay.
Because I'm finding that a lot of the people that actually do love my work are queer Latinas or queer Latinx. And I've been finding these many intersectionalities, right? The ones that I know I've been in, but I don't see a lot of, right? And they're like, oh my God, I love your work. Thank you for doing what you do. And I'm like, oh my God, this is my ideal client. This is the person that I wanted to talk to. And, and I feel like using social media as a platform and showcasing not only my growth, also talking about issues in all aspects. I feel like in my stories, you might get one like about immigration, and then all of a sudden, trans women rights, or trans rights in general that are being destroyed across the US, and like so many bills that are being passed. And then you get another one that's like, oh my God, this is a Latina mom making tortillas or something. That's literally like what you see in my stories. And these are all my intersectionalities. But I feel like I said, I want to amplify what's going on within our queer community, because we're growing. We're just not represented in statistics a lot. We have general statistics that are very, very old now. I feel like a lot of the data isn't up to date. And plus, when it's Pride, everyone loves us during Pride. Yeah. Everyone doesn't love us the rest of the year, and we're queer 24/7. So here we are, like, okay. And I know I wanted to get to this conversation, but not only as small business owners, it's really important to reflect us, but it's also how are we reflected by corporations?
Yes. Woo! Okay. So you know this, but I am doing a lot of work about that topic, particularly this month. I'll jump ahead and then I'll give you the background. So the first thing to know is that I am tracking corporate pride through this database called the Corporate Pride Tracker, where we're literally looking at some of the top businesses and corporations in the world to see what they're doing, what pride campaigns or initiatives or collections they're doing, and like if they're donating money to different nonprofits, LGBTQ nonprofits, or how they're spending that money, et cetera, right? But the background of that is, about 2 years ago, I really started paying attention to like this idea of rainbow washing, which is like every Pride Month, you start to see these companies like just drape their logos on social media or their T-shirts and their, if they're a consumer brand, they'll start selling products with rainbows and Pride Month stuff. And at the same time, you would hear that they were like supporting politicians who were, creating the bills that are like literally trying to oppress and eradicate queer people, right?
Yeah.
So there was a tension there that I think a lot of people, including myself, were noticing. Then fast forward to this year, though, with like the onslaught of just like anti-LGBTQ legislation, we start, and then just sort of like this new version of like culture war against queer folks. I started to see, especially like around the time of Bud Light and that
Oh
whole
yeah.
made up controversy with Dylan Mulvaney, I started to think, we need to be paying attention to like what these corporations are doing for Pride Month this year more than ever, right? Because it's one thing to be an ally, a corporate ally, when things are, fun and frivolous and like, and when there's no heat, when the kitchen is, when the oven is not on. But like, when that temperature, when the water starts to boil, you really start to see who the true corporate allies are and what they do. And so, a horrible example of corporate allyship, of course, is like Bud Light, right?
No.
They asked this trans woman influencer, Dylan Mulvaney, to do a just very simple brand campaign. Right wingers completely destroyed her over
Yeah.
it. And Bud Light didn't stick up for her, right? Like,
Yeah.
so like you bring someone into the lion's den and then you don't have the courage to like pull them out or
Yeah.
defend them once the lions start snarling and biting. But a good example of this is like the North Face, right? So they have a Pride collection, and people were trying to do the same sort of thing to them that they did to Bud Light, and they were like, actually, no, we don't care. We're gonna stick with our Pride
Yeah.
collection, and we're gonna do it. And so keep doing it regardless of what is, regardless of the very vocal minority, because it is a minority, right?
Yeah.
Statistics show that almost three-fourths, almost 75% of U.S. Non-queer Americans like to see queer folks in advertising, and they want LGBTQ people to be supported by companies. But it's just like that small vocal minority. So I say all that to say that I've been tracking this and going to be publishing it in a report later this month to sort of tease out the, analyze the data, tease out the best practices, the
Yeah.
insights, the things that not only we as consumers can learn about what they're doing for Pride Month this year, but also what corporations can learn about how to be better allies and how to better market
Yes.
to us, not just during Pride Month, but all year long. And the last thing I'll say is that the reason I'm doing this is not like my concern is queer owned businesses, right? Like my biggest concern is that I want to uplift and to amplify LGBTQ people who are entrepreneurs and to really make sure that our companies are doing well and that we're able to support ourselves and our communities
Yeah.
economically. However, I do think it's important that these big corporations are in support of us because, as we know, in a capitalistic society where the
Yeah.
money goes, where the money or whatever, where marketing goes, all of that, that really does affect society as a whole. And if we start to see a lot of these big corporations throw up their hands, pull away, all of that sort of stuff, that's not necessarily a good sign for just our rights in
in the
U.S.
workplace or supporting corporations and
Exactly.
as consumers,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I think it's important to track that and just to know what's going on because that, knowledge is power. And the more you know, the more you observe, the better you're able to like prepare or pivot or, you know, just support each other for what's to come. So I'll stop.
yeah.
But I could
No,
talk about this all day.
girl, let's talk about it. No, I like learning. This is like that's why I wanted to make sure that like this podcast is not only for me to educate mi gente, my community, the ones who actually fall into this intersectionality of being a person of color, queer, or business owner, but also that like these are the things that are going on. Like these are the things that we're facing, you know, like I want you guys to hear that there's more than like our values matter. And if you are a supporter, ally, or a person in the LGBTQ plus community, awareness is key. And
Yeah,
especially money talks in this country, right? Money is what makes moves in this country.
yeah,
And if we see that, you know, for example, the one that affected at least the Latinx community was Jay-Z D's collaboration with
yeah.
Target. And that was like, I know they didn't take off everything from the store. Like they still have some products, but every LGBTQ product is in the back of the store now.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
like
these are
literally,
real people, right? Like
yeah, like
these are
these are
not,
people.
yeah, they're not some major corporation. They are JZD is a small Latina owned business that got a great opportunity that was snatched away because bigots want
Yeah.
to, run amok. That directly impacts our communities,
Yeah,
right?
no,
Yeah.
it 100% does. And I know there was more folk, right? I know there was another person or another small business that happened, you know, that was with the Target collaboration and also had most of their products removed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There were several, like one's called Ash and Chess, like stationery. There was another like T-shirt and apparel brand that had the same thing happen. Yeah,
And the thing for me is money moves, money talks, and our money is powerful. And
yeah,
especially when you think about the Latinx community's growth in the United States and the impact,
yeah,
we're literally going to be by 2050, 1 in 4 individuals is going to be of Hispanic Latinx descent.
yep, yep.
And we're going to have a lot of power. And I know a lot of the Latinx individuals lean, you know, at least the older generations lean on the more conservative side, but the newer
Hmm.
generations are evolving. We're coming out as queer. We're starting our businesses. We're speaking out about our identities and stuff like that. So it's important to understand that we have brothers and sisters of all colors, of all backgrounds. And like the fight is all of us. It's not
Yeah,
just, oh, because no me, like in Spanish, it's like, oh, well, I don't, if it's not around me, like I'm not gonna worry about it, you know. And it's
mm,
no, this is our community, and I think it's important that we're aware and that we see and that we help because as an ally, it's not just wearing a shirt.
hmm,
Like as
yeah,
an ally, it's sharing, advocating, going to protests, supporting your friends, family that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Ask them, how are you doing after I saw this? I don't know. I thought of you. I want to make sure you're okay because we have feelings and emotions. And we're also,
yeah,
you know, I feel bad when I, you know, see a trans individual that's been murdered, committed suicide, whatever, you know, I see them in the news. Like I was mentioning earlier, sometimes in the Latino media, you might hear about it, but like it's like either a death or something like that that happened, something cruel. And it makes me really sad because that's just not the image that we portray, nor are we just drag queens either. Like, you know, the queer
no,
community isn't just drag queen and supporting drag and all that. It's
yeah.
like
It's
we
just
love
normal
drag.
people.
Yeah. We're just normal people supporting
Yeah,
the intersections of our community, the diversity in our community. We are just loving and supporting. And I think when you know, it really comes down to love at the end of the day with our community, and we love each other so much. And with the work that you're doing and the way that corporations, you know, try to support, you know, these marginalized communities, LGBTQ plus, even Latino communities, it's like, where are the dollars going though? Right? You can
yeah,
represent us, you can share our business, like whatever. I love it. I'm here for it. But where
absolutely.
is the money going? Is it going back to these small businesses? Is it going back to these communities? Or you're just saying, I'm going to share your products. You're going to get a lot of business just from us sharing or having your products in our store. Like, that's not enough.
No,
We need more than that. And I'm glad that you're creating not only a place for us to find transparency about what's going on with corporations and their support for, LGBTQ plus businesses, but also how to, from the business perspective, how to understand what's going on, how to not be a part of the problem, or learn how to actually support and be an ally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I'm glad you're doing that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that, like it's a lot of work, but it's important, right? And like, I know that you can probably resonate with this too, is like being a small business owner is a lot, it's not, I'm not going to compare to like having a corporate job, but it's a lot of work, right? Like, but it's worth it. It's work that's worth it. And I just think also about going back to like intersectionality and stuff, like, in our society, like when one of us is like one demographic or one group of people is being attacked, it won't be long before that trickles down or trickles up to someone else, right? Yeah. Like to another group. So like, as a black person, right, as a cisgender black queer man, right, I'm not trans, so if I were, an unconscious, if I didn't have a level of consciousness, I would think, well, I'm not trans, so I'm safe. Yeah. That's the dumbest thing I could think, right? Yeah. Because after they come for trans folks, they're coming for just all queer folks, right? Yeah. Or they're going to be simultaneously coming for black folks with all sorts of things that's been happening in the 400 years since we've been in this country, right? Yeah. And so, and like you see that, Florida is a wonderful example of this, because in Florida, they're coming for immigrants, they're coming for women, they're coming for trans and queer folks, they're coming for, black folks. Yeah. It's just all, and so one of the things that I always try to demonstrate is that, like, we don't, unless you are a cis, hetero, white, Christian, rich man in this country, you have to pay attention about what's going on, because once they come for one group, you're on the chopping block next, right? And so most of us just don't have the privilege to not care and not be aware. And but that's also an empowering thing too, because it almost feels like, there's a strength in numbers if we can unite, right? Yeah. And if we can support each other despite or because of our differences, right? Like, as I am just as enraged about what's happening in Florida for immigrants with that awful law that they just passed, as I am about what's happening with, like, the anti-woke laws and stuff like that. And I think that the more we sort of recognize the intersections of not only our identities, but the intersections of oppression and just sort of all of the isms and phobias and all that sort of stuff, we can defeat it.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that you're doing the work on your end and I'm trying to do the work on my end. Yeah. And I think together and with more people coming up, and especially Gen Z being as loud as we are, I'm technically Gen Z, guys, okay? I'm technically Gen Z, not millennial. I don't know. I think it's fortunate because I feel like we are louder. I feel like we have a voice now with social platforms. We can say what we want. And with TikTok being TikTok, it's like, oh my God, you're now have 1 million views on this video about you speaking up about something that happened to you. You know what I mean? And people are now aware, and then it goes on the news and stuff like that. So I feel like we have the opportunity to not only amplify our message, but also bridge the gaps of being unaware, right? I understand that for centuries, being queer, being black, having all of these intersectionalities was like a no-no, right? Like, no se habla de eso, we don't talk about it. Even in the Latinx community, right? We have racism within our own community, and we're very homophobic, you know? And I know that from my own experience, from seeing everyone that I grew up around, like, these weren't conversations we were having. We weren't paying attention. I had a gay tío, but we didn't really talk about it. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's important that our community understands that this is a whole intersectionality within our communities with various other communities, like LGBTQ plus individuals, like spread between not only being Caucasian but also like Black, but also Asian. Like, we have so many cultures within our culture.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
We're the most diverse demographic of them all because there are queer people in every demographic.
Yeah.
Every race, religion, nationality, gender, continent, whatever you can think of, we're there. Yeah. And so
whether you love us or not, we're there.
Whether you and whether you want us to be there or not. That's a good point. I was something that's on my mind too that harkens back to something that you said earlier, though, is that, like, you know, one of the things that with Queerency that, like, is part of the mission is providing possibility models, not role models, but possibility models. So to see what's possible for LGBTQ people to be in business. And when I look at you and your work, I think that you are a possibility model, not just for other queer Latinx people or Latinx people who are in business, but also for, like, just straight, you know, everyday Latinx people who don't really know if they know LGBTQ person, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would imagine that, like, when you show up on their For You page or in that somebody shared one of your stories, they're like, wow, like, she's just like me, right? And then they learn that you are a member of the LGBTQ community. And I would think that, like, not for everyone, but for a good amount of people, that changes something in them, right? Like, and that's such a positive thing because, you know, you're not going to reach everyone and you're not supposed to reach everyone, but you can reach some people. And I think that that is a really good thing about, like, social media, but also just, like, living authentically through your work, right? Because they'll be like, you remind me of my, right? Like, I'm sorry, I forgot the Spanish word for, like, niece or nephew or whatever.
Mi sobrina,
right?
sobrino,
Okay, yeah. But, like, people look at you and they'll be familiar, right? They'll say, I know her, but I don't know her, but I know her, right? And I think that that's the work. And I know people have a similar response to me too. Like, and I think, you know, that's a positive thing. And the more sort of bridges that we can build, you know, without compromising ourselves or our identities or whatever.
Our safety also.
Our safety, our mental health. Like, I'm not about, like, I don't think that marginalized people owe it to other people to teach them or to make them feel comfortable or to anything like that. But I do think that it's a good thing when our work and our visibility and us just being us does change something in people outside our community.
Yeah, awareness is key, and just with one video or 15 seconds, you see a connection, right? I think that's what we're trying to talk about, the connection between someone you might not fully understand, but you can relate in some part. And that's the intersectionality, that we're so diverse in cultures now, you know, even mixed race, being queer, non-queer, being, like, everything. Like, it's we're now in a day and age, and this is America, where you're a melting pot, where we have everything, but we can't continue to oppress the things that are here and present. You know, I feel like this year has been very heavy on anti-trans rights, you know, and very heavy on anti-queer bills being passed in Florida, even Texas and stuff like that, and it just makes me really sad because I'm like, we've been here, we've been fighting for a long time, even before I was born, and the fight is still going on. And I think it's a fight a lot of us face within our own just demographics, where our backgrounds, but it's just, I don't know. I've been feeling very exhausted, but one thing that I do always look forward to is seeing the positive impacts that we're making in our economy, and the positive impacts even myself that I can share and be transparent and show up authentically. And if you don't like me, that's okay. You're not supposed to like me. That's totally fine. And I hope you hear my message, and I hope you hear what Travis is saying, and be like, oh, okay. But you now are aware of what's going on, and you now are aware, and you can't say you're blind to it, because then after that, if you just want to continue to be blind, that is really on you, right? And so like I said, the positivity part is really what I look forward to going forward, is just seeing how we're changing and we're evolving, we're showing up and amplifying our voices. And also, like I said, with your page, I feel like I don't even know, like I see it already, it's grown so much in like the last year. I don't even know what your goal is with Queerency. I would love to know, because honestly, I feel like it could be a magazine. I feel like it could be like a news channel. Like I could feel like it could be so much more too.
Like I think it's hard to like say the specifics about what I want Queerency to be 3 years, 5 years from now, because I'm more driven by just like the impact that I want it to have, right? Like the impact that I want it to continue to have and to just be even more of is just like continuing to show possibility models for what and who LGBTQ people can be in both business and in life beyond that. And I want to create smart queer content, right, that like fills some of the gaps of information that we can't find other places, or to really curate that information. And whether that is a really robust website or a continued growth with like social media or some other format or medium, the medium doesn't matter to me as much as the message does, right? And the impact. And like you're a good example of that too, because like you didn't have a podcast, you didn't start out with a podcast, right? And yet now you're doing a podcast, and that is reaching other people, other segments of your audience, maybe some of the same segments that see you on TikTok or Instagram. But regardless of the medium, the message is still the same. And that's how I want it to be for Queerency. Like I just want it to be a media company that provides smart queer content and possibility models for who we can be and what we can achieve. I want it to continue to be the sort of, I want business to stay at the core of it, but I also would like to see other categories that focus on other parts of our lives as well, whether that be health and wellness or, family, whatever. But I think that as long as it's like smart when I say smart, I don't mean like PhD.
Educational, right?
Yeah, but just educational. Like we don't always have to like, you can be educational and entertaining. You can be smart and authentic and fun, right? And that's what I want. So
I can't wait to see what Queerency grows into. From, like I said, I love your page. The second I found it, the second we chatted, I feel like we had like a 2-hour conversation, and usually my cafecitos were like an hour. But when I meet someone who I genuinely like love and appreciate what they're doing and we align, I'm like, yes, like I want to continue having these conversations, because not only that, I learn from you, because you're the, the subject matter expert in this field, and I can come to you with questions about the growth and everything like that, because from my perspective, I want to know what's going on in all of my intersectionalities. I want to study it. I want to see, like in my feed, I feel like I'm super intentional, because I want to make sure that I consume the things that I really want to learn and see, because I don't just follow nobody just to follow nobody. And sorry, I love everybody and I want to follow people, but for me, I really want to be specific to my content, or I might just have to mute some people, because I like learning, and your content helps me learn. That smart content, right? And similar to mine, it's like I could literally be doing just this, and I record a video on how to start budgeting. I don't know, and it's just a part of my life, right? And this is my intersectionality of finance and merging the growth within not only the Latinx marginalized groups, but also being queer, right? And how wealth is being created in our communities, all communities. That's the thing. And so I love what you do. I'm your number one supporter, and thank you. I just want to say also thank you. You always amplify me on your page, and I just love you for that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I feel like that's where I also find more of my queer people that follow me, and they're like, okay, we fit,
Yeah.
And it makes me excited when I see them come along. And one of the questions that I always ask my guests is, what does riqueza mean to you? And so riqueza means wealth. So I would love to know, what does wealth mean to you?
It means just a life well lived, like a balanced life. So it's not just monetarily for me or monetary for me. It's wealth is having good relationships, solid, authentic, trusting relationships, healthy relationships. It's being able to make a difference in your community, regardless of whether that's with money or just with time and care and service. And then, like, from a money perspective, it's like having enough money to live comfortably and also contribute to my community and the ones I love. So yeah, like it's both family, community, comfortability, and just being able to make an impact in whatever way.
I love that. I know we're aligned, because I would say the same thing. It's
Yeah,
about
like
giving back.
yeah, it's about giving back. Like I was thinking, I was telling my friend the other day, like I don't know what I would do with X amount of dollars, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I know what I would do, what I need to live comfortably, and I know the impact that I can make with a certain amount of money. And so I think that just wanting to get rich and build a wealth only monetarily is sort of, that's boring, right?
Yeah.
You should, if you want to build wealth in a way that has a grand vision for it and what you want to do with it. And that could just be for your family. Like if you want your grandchildren and great grandchildren to be able to have a better life than you, that could be the vision. If you don't, want children but want to make an impact, that could be on your community. That's another way. But I think that wealth in both your personal life, wealth in your bank account or whatever, can all be done or can all be achieved in a way that leaves a positive impact on yourself, your community, and the world.
Yes, 100%. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, Travers, so where can people find you? I mean, obviously Queerency, but where are your platforms? What's your website?
The website is queerency.com, and I am at Queerency on all the social media platforms. So at QUEERENCY. Eerency.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Travers, for being a guest. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure to share it. Make sure to tag us if you do share it, and follow, rate us. Honestly, I love having these type of conversations because not only do we get to educate y'all, I get to educate myself. We get to educate everybody, on this conversation. And, muchas gracias, Travers. Muchas gracias.
All right. Thank you for having me. I just loved it. Thank you so much.
Of course. Alrighty.